right, I'm sure these guys have tons of questions. Who wants to kick things off? Yes.
First, I promised Maureen Maver I would say hello. I guess she used to work for you.
Maureen Mavar, sure.
She's a friend of the family. I'm a special effects artist who was born in 1985.
Right.
There are two movies that led me to do this for a living, one being Legend and one being Labyrinth. So I owe almost my entire livelihood to you and that team. So this is one of those rare opportunities where I could say thank you to the person who made me, basically.
Oh, well, that's very sweet. Well, it was fun. It was fun times, heady times, fun, really fun. And Legend was made right next to us. I think I was, because I married Mia Sara, and so I never met her. But when I was always rolling in about 5 minutes late for crew call on Little Shop of Horrors and nearly running over people at Pinewood, there would be this girl walking around in a nightgown, and that was Mia, and I never talked to her. She doesn't remember me almost hitting her in the car.
I had an interesting childhood, but I grew up around several of the new romantic musicians. And when I was very, very young, I met David very briefly, and I was telling them, I thought he was Jareth come to take me away.
Was he wearing the codpiece?
He was. I was young, so the perspectives were different.
Knowing him, he probably did keep the codpiece. He probably did.
I thought that would get a chuckle out of you. I was convinced he'd come to collect me, and the goblins weren't far behind.
Well, I have to say about David, he was an absolute ball to work with. He was so professional and so not what any of those guys can be. He was never demanding. He was always on set. He was hanging out, goofing around with the crew. He'd always go to the pub after and have a drink with the crew. He was really fun to work with, and really professional. He never forgot a line, unless he had to corpse. Sometimes he just had to. It was irresistible. Well, when you corpse another actor, you don't know the term corpsing someone. That's when you have your back to camera, and the other person is looking at camera, and you just start making faces so that they start laughing, and you ruin the take. It's called corpsing the actor, and it's really unfair to do. Yeah. Right. Yes. I haven't talked to him recently about it, but when his daughter was 17, which was probably 10 years ago, does that sound right? Is his daughter about 27 now? I think that was probably the last time that I talked to him. His son, who was Zowie at the time, and then Joey, he worked in the Creature Shop. Right after Labyrinth, he came and worked in the Creature Shop for a while, and of course now he has a very successful directing career. But his daughter, it was his daughter's favorite thing that he did. So David called me a few times to just share how excited he still was with Labyrinth. I think he had a real renewed love for it after his daughter loved it so much. Because at the time, people didn't really know how to respond to it. And I think that's part of the whole thing with Labyrinth. It's like people didn't really know how to respond to it who were big fans of my father. And people didn't really know how to respond to it who were big fans of David's. Because it's an unusual piece, and it's very unique. But I think David particularly grew to really appreciate it later. It's a shame because I think his music is so good in this, and David was one of those artists who was having a feud with the music industry right as we were releasing this movie, because there was a period there where the radio stations were refusing to pay to play. So he and some of the very successful artists at the time, just anything that they had control of, they just held it off. So it's a shame because I think his music is so good, but while the movie was out, it couldn't get any radio play because the radio stations refused to pay, and David refused to allow them to play if they weren't going to. So.
Dark Crystal 2,
Dark
Fraggle
Crystal
Rock movie,
2.
Labyrinth 2.
Oh, I know. There's so many things. Well, Labyrinth 2, I don't know about. Dark Crystal is something. It's something we are still very enthusiastically developing. But it's like any film. When it's still in development, it's still in development, and you cannot predict when it's going to be ready. Movies are in development, and then one day they're suddenly in pre-production. But I can say it's that one has a very, very good story, and it's just trying to put the right distribution and finances together really to make it. No, actually, I think that was actually really fun for her. I actually think that was easier, and I think as you watch the movie, I think she's having an easier time acting with the puppets than she is in the opening sequence when she's playing off of the actors playing her parents and stuff like that. I actually think at her age, it was really, and she was very close to all the. Shari was like one of her best friends, who was inside Hoggle, and Ludo, Ron Muick, who's inside of Ludo, is sort of this grumpy big Australian guy, and we were all really close, and I actually think she really enjoyed the whole process, and she really didn't struggle with it. I think she would more struggle with the actor-to-actor scenes. I think she did a great job with that ballroom scene with David, but it has no dialogue. But she does. That's probably some of her finest acting, is where she is playing that energy with David during that ballroom scene. But I think that was actually harder for her than doing the scenes goofing around with Hoggle and Didymus and Ludo. She was a great kid, though. I'm saying great kid. It was one of those where you try to work with an actress who was at that age of they're between kid and adult, and that's what we got. We got a kid that arrived, and by the end there was an adult. It was interesting to actually be working with somebody who was right in that cusp.
So who lost Hoggle in Alabama?
The airline. No, the airline lost them. It was during. I guess it was during publicity.
For anyone who didn't
publicity
hear
tour.
that question, it was who lost Hoggle in Alabama.
No, and then it ended up not. It ended up in that unclaimed baggage. Yeah, it was.
It got restored but destroyed.
Destroyed in the restoring. It's we didn't know it had been found. And then it was, because when it was found, nobody called us and said, "Oh, I have your thing," because they didn't know. It was lost by one of the airlines when we were in publicity.
So
it was a full Hoggle.
At what point in the film had been finished?
Oh no, the film was finished, and we were doing our publicity tour. We were going from city to city, and Hoggle was doing appearances, and we lost one, and we only had two of the full Hoggles, and one got lost by an airline. We just immediately brought in the backup, and it was never found. And then whatever, it was 6-7 years ago. When did it happen? 6 or 7 years ago. It's like this unclaimed baggage museum opened, and there's Hoggle. It's like, well, there it is. It's funny that when you lose bags. I went to Greece with my family when I was 12, and we lived in Armonk, New York, down a country street. The driveway went up and over a hill and then down to the front door. And fully 7 years after we got back from Greece, I woke up one morning and opened the front door, and there's my suitcase sitting. The airline had found it, had managed to get somebody to bring it out to the country, up over the hill, found the front door, and they just put it down and ran.